And I say art saved my life. Well, my art did save my life.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Beyond the Manuscript podcast. I am your host, Cooper Anderson, and today we have an incredibly unique guest here for you guys. Actor, producer, author, and just all-around awesome person to talk with, Mr. Dar Dixon. Mr. Dixon, how are we doing today?
Cooper, man, honest to God, if you ever decide you want to segue into Hollywood, you could be the hype man. That was a good opening.
It's years of just looking at myself in the mirror and just pretending I have friends.
That's where everybody starts. That's where everybody starts. I look in the mirror. I'm good enough. I'm smart enough.
Yeah, exactly.
People like me. Yeah, I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
That's great. I'm excited to have you here. So, for those of you at home listening, currently I am working with Dar here at Manuscripts in the very early stages that we call positioning to get his book off of the ground. And he's got quite a bit of a way to go, but after talking for a couple of hours with Dar here, he just had such a unique life story, personality, and just crazy stories to talk about that I just had to have him as a guest on our show here today. So, Dar, to kind of get things started off today, I wanted to ask you what might be the most unique question I've ever had to ask someone. But could you please tell us the time in your life where you found yourself in a cult, and what were your experiences like?
You must have me confused with another Dar. I don't. Yeah. A cult, right? What a weird question.
Mm-hmm.
No one ever joins a cult. No one goes like, look at that, man. I want to join that cult and drink weird Jello shots and kill myself, or hole myself up in a house in Waco, Texas, and get firebombed by the ATF and the federal government. It's and this is kind of the subject of the book too, indirectly, because it's such a kind of a taboo topic. You get involved with a group of people or a person or a business sometimes, or an organization or a religious group, or a philosophical group or something, but it's usually just a group of people or a single person, and they're very charismatic, or there's just a lot of simpatico there, and you feel like you've met kindred spirits. And without going really far down the rabbit hole, in the beginning of everything, you get love bombed. And that sounds funny to some people, they've told me. And what love bombing is when you just get inundated with all of this positive reinforcement and actual statements of, oh, I love you. Oh, you're so great. You're so lovely. Oh, I love you so much. And although it's not meant in a romantic way necessarily, whether you like that or not, the way the human brain's wired, you're hooked. And you just want to keep going back and getting more and getting more. And the next thing you know, might be a couple of weeks, it might be a month, and you realize something's off, and it just keeps getting more off. But by then, the emotional hooks have been latched into you. And then, like the title of my book, that emotional vacuum within you, it's too late. They're meeting that need, not in a good way.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to go more into that? Can you describe what
Sure.
an emotional vacuum is? What are the factors that someone might find themselves lacking, where an organization could come in and try to fill and then take advantage of that person? Can you explain a little more about that?
Sure. This came about, the title of the book was, I got to be honest, it wasn't although I came up with it, it was indirectly. I was talking with Eric, and he said, so what did you learn about cults and life? And what's the things that you've learned about that topic matter? And I said, well, most people think that you are weak, or you're stupid, or you're just, oh, you're so vulnerable. Some form of you're not really all there, and you don't understand, that you're not, it's not like the lights are on, but nobody's home. And that's not accurate. That's not accurate. What it is you are looking to meet these emotional needs. And it creates this vacuum within you. And I know it sounds intriguing and good. It should. I think it's a great title, but you've got needs that have to be met. They're unavoidable. And Abraham Maslow talked about them. Tony Robbins has a great thing, the 6 human needs. I really like that more. And if you're not getting these needs met, you're going to do whatever it takes to get them met because you have to have them met. And so frequently, love and connection, I talked about the love bombing, significance, feeling like, you're important and worthy and valuable. And, when I was going down this path after, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but when I began my recovery after 20 years in this group, that was hard, really hard. I learned that if you kind of whittle it down, everyone in the world, the 2 biggest wounds or issues within people, that's probably a more accurate way to put it, is they don't feel lovable. I'm not lovable, and I'm not worthy or good enough. Mm-hmm. Right. And so those are very powerful and very deeply subconscious and outside of the awareness of most people. And those are driving the bus. Mm. And you've got to get those needs met. And so this is what happens. This is very general, broad terms, because we don't have a lot of time here. That's how this process happens. That's how these emotional hooks get set, mm-hmm. and people get caught up in these bad situations.
Gotcha. Did you want to talk about what your emotional needs were? You were,
man, I was hoping you weren't going to ask me.
So do you want to? Yeah. So
sure.
The question is do you want to talk about what you were in need of when you were finding yourself in that situation?
Sure. So I'm half Iranian, half American. My father is Iranian born and bred, and my mother's a white woman. Her background is English, Welsh, and Irish. And he grew up in Tehran, Iran. She grew up in southeastern Idaho in a little tiny town, population of 2,000 people. He was raised Muslim, never practiced it. Quote, all religions are the cause of war, unquote. That's my father. My mother was raised a Mormon. I was born in Tehran.
Yeah.
Came to this country when I was 2. We moved all over. We moved a lot. I've moved personally over 80 times in my life. I'm the oldest of 4 boys, mm-hmm. and all 3 of my brothers happen to be gay men. Mm. And so we look like this form of a white person, whatever the hell that means. Mm-hmm. And we've got these very Persian names, very Iranian names. Mm-hmm. So as you may or may not imagine, there was a tap dance that happened every time we'd move. We were the new kids in town. Like, what kind of a name is that? What? How do you say? Mm-hmm. You go through it a million times. So like my first name is really Daryush. But instead of having a 5-minute, what kind of a name is that? Where are you from? It got shortened down to Dar, and that stuck. So for me, in that little thing, I said that little piece there. And let me back up 1 second. We went back to Iran. For me, it was going back. For my brothers, it was their first time to live in Iran in the mid 70s. And in those days, Iran and America had a great relationship, and the United States was helping through defense contractors, Westinghouse, Bell Helicopter, McDonnell Douglas, et cetera, to help the Iranian government build up and bolster their military. Mm-hmm. And so we were there doing that. My father was running the Iranian government's facility down in the city of Shiraz in South Iran. And lo and behold, after the 3rd year, we got warning that things were brewing and the Iranian Revolution happened. We literally escaped the country with just our suitcases and the clothes on our back.
Yeah.
Here I am in the United States. What happened? Is my father going to get out? Why do we move all the time? Why do I have this Persian name, this white boy face? How did 3 gay brothers? Am I gay? Am I denying something within myself? How come we never talk about religion? Because my mother was raised Mormon, didn't practice it, doesn't like it. She calls herself a recovering Mormon. No disparagement to anyone's religious beliefs. I am a non-religious person myself. But underneath all of this, I have a deep yearning to understand what we're doing here. What's the meaning of life? Why is there so much discord? Why aren't we doing the basics like, you know, feeding the homeless and sheltering them and taking care of the elderly and the sick and protecting women? What a concept, right? Giving them,
Mhm.
autonomy over their own bodies. Well, why is racism a thing? And like these bothered me. I didn't
Mhm.
have the words for it when I was younger. And so when I met these guys, or this guy who ran the cult, um, he started, that's where he came in hot. And
Yeah.
his first question was like, he was into astrology. That was one of his hooks. That was one of his angles, his tricks. And he started talking to me about Vedic astrology. He said it was better. And I was like, really? And started to explain things to me that my little 22-year-old brain thought, wow, this guy really knows something. And he knows more
Mhm.
about me than I know about myself. Well, that wasn't true looking back now. But to my, confused, many questions unanswered, emotionally unsatisfied, feeling, just feeling weird a lot of the time. This was a chance for me to be a part of something bigger than myself. And, if I had just thought a little bit more, there are a lot of other ways to meet that need.
Mhm.
But this one worked. This one worked for me. He was very dramatic. He was very charismatic. He was hilarious. He happened to be a gay man. That didn't bother me, obviously,
Mhm.
or maybe not obviously, but I love my brothers, and that's never been an issue for me. And he was just really dramatic and entertaining, and also, without sounding dismissive, a little bit crazy. So it was very intriguing to me. I mean, I enjoyed this kind of character,
Mhm.
and it filled the need for the crazy that I needed in my life, but in a really bad way.
Mhm.
And he had a game plan, and I didn't have one. I did not
Okay.
have a game plan. I just gotten out of college football. I gave up a Division I football scholarship at
Mhm.
Bowling Green State University, and I'd received a really bad concussion. And back in the
Mhm.
days, the coach was like, "Get up and rub some dirt on it." And you're like, "But
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
my brain, right?" So yeah, I was making bad decisions. No one really looked at the fact that like this kid's personality is changing and he's doing different things and getting involved in different things. So there you are.
How did you leave? How were you able to leave an
You know,
organization
like
like that?
like like most things, including building a book, right? It's not a linear process.
Mhm.
I was in for just about a year, and then I'm going to shorten down time here,
Oh yeah,
and I
yeah.
came back to California. It took place in New York, and so I left New York and returned back to Southern California. But then I went back a year later,
Mm.
and I was there for like another 3.5, 4 years, and they kicked me out, which is a whole conversation.
Mhm.
But after that time, that was around in 1989, I was, on my own, lost, dazed, and confused in Southern Cal, which was great to be out of this group, but also like I really thought I had damned myself to hell, whatever that meant. And I'd really
Mm.
blown this chance to do this thing this guy was talking about. And about 5 years later, I run into my buddy who was in the cult with me, who had become quite by accident a model and gotten so good at it and so popular, he became the world's first male supermodel. And so he walks into this restaurant in Marina Del Rey that I just started working at.
Mhm.
And his buddy Fabio is with him, Fabio with the
From the
long,
romance covers.
the romance covers and the I can't believe it's not butter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Fabio's a great guy. He's nothing like what everybody thinks.
Mhm.
And I'm like, Hoyt, Fabio, and Hoyt and I start talking, and he lets me know that the cult leader had died about a year after I'd been booted, and that I got to talk to you. And so we met the next day and we talked, and I said, "Man, can I come back? Can I come back?" Now I was in love with this woman
Mhm.
that I was involved with at the time, and for the first time in my life, I was like, I want to make a family and I want to get
Mm.
married, which
Mhm.
I never talk like that. And that was like the opposite of the teachings of the cult.
Yeah.
And yeah, I walked away from all of it and I went back to this cult, which had now gone to North Carolina,
Yeah.
and things just they were bad, but it went from bad to just
To worse kind of a thing.
I'm trying to think of a word worse than worse. I
Mm-hmm.
can't come up with it. It was bad. And so I finally left in late 96, Halloween of 96 to be exact.
The
I
whole
don't know if
wow,
that's,
interesting. Yeah,
I don't know if that's figurative or
yeah. That's just it's one of those unique coincidences. It
it
sounds like
is. Yeah.
good. Um, So we were talking about this on one of our meetings for positioning on defining how does someone fall into one of these kinds of organizations.
Uh-huh.
And I think we were talking about how um, an identity or even like a lack of identity can be a huge factor into this. When I was growing up in rural North Carolina, I would remember seeing a lot of like classmates of mine. They would they were kind of frustrated with the world. They were frustrated with their home life, and they didn't know who they were as a person because when you're a teenager, nobody knows who they are, right? They're still discovering. That's
True.
part of being a
True.
teenager is discovering
That's
who
right.
you are.
That's right.
And so they had fallen into that crowd, and then I would come back from like summer vacation, and the back of their new truck would have a decal of the Confederate battle flag on the back of it, and they would start spouting all kinds of nonsense. What I find is that they would then make that their personality, that they had a new purpose, and someone who does not have good intentions has twisted that purpose into, I don't know, what is technically called like antisocial behavior.
You said a mouthful.
I know.
First of all, thank you for being so honest and speaking honestly about a topic that I'm going to cover in the book,
Mm-hmm.
because, as you'll discover, that it's deeply personal to me. So many things to say there. You are right. When we talked about this, when we got off the call, I just kept thinking to myself, I told my wife, I'm like, this guy's got this unbelievable insight, and he's a white man who grew up in North Carolina. And I told her what you just said. And she was, of course, moved. And I said, like, what are the odds, right? What are the odds? That's crazy. You're 100% right. So let me start. I don't know where to start. The cult I was in, all
Right.
cults do this.
Mm-hmm.
All cults, all of them. I promise you. And don't take anything I say at face value.
Mm-hmm.
Do your own reading, do your own research. And I'm loath to use that word because nowadays it means I went and watched a couple of biased, insane YouTube videos. That's not what I'm suggesting. If you follow the paper trail, if you follow the money, that's what's going on. There's the talk, and talk is cheap, which is why I say don't believe anything I'm saying. Look for the evidence. Okay. All cults fall to the far right, which is invariably hate speech, hate groups, and racism. And then they begin to espouse, preach, and act violently. Second thing, so you're right about this. Historically, and this happened to us in our country in the United States in 2008 when we had the housing bubble burst, and we discovered the whole thing was this house of cards, and that the financial system really is built upon the consumer, the individual's confidence in the money. Okay, what's he talking about? When a person is financially destroyed, financially crippled, financially enslaved, they're poor. What ends up happening is the narrative gets built that it's not you, it's the people that don't look like you.
Yeah.
It's the system's at fault, and people of color, the poor, immigrants, and the elderly are to blame. And if you look around now, without becoming any more incendiary or inflammatory with my commentary, I think there's plenty of evidence to justify what I just said. And again, that's historically the pattern. And so when you're in a place like North Carolina, where you were in a small little village like a hamlet, I'm being a little dramatic there, but there are a lot of poor people. And where we were in Western North Carolina, we were in the hills amongst hillbillies, literal, right? They're not educated. They've been poor for years. They've got a double wide if they're lucky that they live in. Most of them are just really drawn, beat up trailers, and they've just never had any money. And so it becomes very easy to start listening to these horrible hate speech groups and hate groups and start to fall into it, because why? It makes them feel significant. It gives them a connection to something bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
Start to feel more valuable. They feel like they're contributing to something, and usually the narrative is the downfall of the country or the lack of white people in the country. And I could go down that path for a long time, but yeah.
Right. One other thing to add to that, that I've recently done some reading on is just basically, how do people believe just utterly insane conspiracy theories, right? They're not even part of like an organization, but let's say they're super into flat earthers, or the funny one that I could think of is Alex Jones' big rant on frogs turning gay and stuff like that.
Come on, man.
In order to, what it seems like, in order to kind of believe these really big lies, or to get someone to believe on their side, the first thing they do is create chaos. And this happens a lot of times with like the worst versions of like social media influencers, or like where they will say just utterly insane things. And then they'll say one or two like true things or kind of like reasonable things.
Right.
They'll go back to saying something crazy. And so they will, they'll grab their own attention for an audience and then then say something kind of reasonable to be like, oh, okay, this guy isn't 100% crazy, but that person's already working. The person's already got their connection to someone.
No, well, I mean, I'm amazed how much you already understand about this and you've read up on it. You're right about that. It's not as hard as people think to get sucked into some permission to speak freely here.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's really not. It's really not. And I'll tell everybody now, and I told you privately, I'm going to say it out loud to everybody here. If I wanted to, if I had to, it's the pain of what that is too. I would never do this. But if I had a gun to my head, so to speak, right? A gun to my head, and I had to do what you just described, I could play a person like a violin.
Yeah.
It would kill me inside. I'd have to be like, and I think I'd probably take the bullet, to be quite honest with you. It's not that hard. It's easy to be dismissive and say, oh, crazy, stupid, nonsense and stuff. And that's all true. However, the way people get caught up in this emotional vacuum, these emotional voids, this emotional need, well, it's emotions. And what people forget is emotions are not beholden to logic and reason. They're just not. We frequently make decisions based on our emotions. In fact, let me back that up. We make all of our decisions based on emotions. Now, we like to BS ourselves and say, oh, well, I'm so smart, and I'm so reasonable and rational. I look at the evidence and the data. Bullshit. You make a decision based on emotions, and then we go back and we try to justify our decision based on the facts that we want. We cherry pick them. That's not opinion. That's science. That's neuroscience. That's facts. And so it's very easy for that to happen. And it happens much more often than you believe. And the basic way it happens is a friend of mine, Steve Hassan, has been one of the leading cult experts for like 45 years. He's a psychologist. He got his PhD earlier this year. And he created something called the BITE model of authoritarian control. And BITE stands for BITE. B is behavioral control, I is information control, T is thought control, E is emotional control. When you manipulate those levers, and what you were describing by stirring people up, getting anger and fear are very powerful levers on the human brain. And we can be the most, like, as yourself, you're an educated master's degree, you can still happen to you. It can still happen to you. And so when those levers start to get played and manipulated, boy, that's a slippery, dangerous slope to be on. And that's what happens. And so you're right. They will spew out stuff that has just about 10% truth to it, and then just keep coming in, stoking those flames. It's the authoritarian playbook 101. Bolsonaro did it in Brazil. Trump is doing it here. Mike Flynn is doing it here through evangelical Christianity. Oh, yeah. Erdogan does it in Turkey. Putin does it in Russia. Xi does it in China. The mullahs do it in Iran. It's nothing new, man. But in this country, We have gotten soft and we've gotten a bit lazy, and we have definitely lost the respect and the drive for education. And that cocktail right there, no bueno.
It's a Molotov cocktail. That's what
it truly is. No exaggeration, no hyperbole. It is a Molotov cocktail. Yeah.
So just because we're on this topic here, what advice?
Let's lift this up. Lift it up a little bit.
Well, I have one last one. Then I definitely want to move on to your time in LA. The last thing I want to end on with this one is, what advice would you give people who you think might be vulnerable to joining one of these organizations?
Oh my God. If would that I could. I learned that there's no one that I can help but myself. And I learned that the best thing that I can do is hope to have influence over someone. And if we kind of extrapolate that, take that out the next 10 steps of thought, then I have to lead by example. That's the best I can do. If you feel like you're in a situation where this person says and does things or makes you feel uncomfortable, that's a red flag, and you should talk to someone that you trust and have known for a long time about what the issue is. But that doesn't happen. And the reason that doesn't happen is because the other person, in that emotional void of getting sucked into some charismatic con man or con woman, they're embarrassed to say anything. I didn't talk about this for 20 years, man, because it's, it's like, it's not my proud suit. Yeah, I got caught up in a pseudo-religious doomsday cult and we slid into the far right. And yeah, man, good times. That doesn't roll off the tongue easily. So people don't want to do it. But if you're not feeling comfortable, if someone's showering you with a lot of love and attention and endless texts and phone calls and emails and gifts that are disproportionate, especially when you first meet them, that's not a good thing. That's a huge red flag. Go and talk to someone that you trust about it, even if it makes you uncomfortable. Trust me, feeling a little uncomfortable about admitting that you're getting suckered, way less painful than what happens if you hang in there for 20 years.
Gotcha. Fascinating stuff. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next part here. So as of right now, so they know. So we're kind of going the tad chronologically. So you leave the cold, you end up with your buddy Hoyt and Fabio, and you're now looking to. I don't know what the next part is, but you end up in Los Angeles as an actor, producer. Tell me, how did you get started in that industry, and what kept you in that industry for so long?
Okay. I'd gotten my Screen Actors Guild card when I got kicked out. So that was back in like 91 or 92. I loved acting. I always wanted to be an actor, but I just didn't have the bollocks to do it because, and this sounds terrible, I've been down for LGBTQ cause forever and a day. I love my brothers. And we won't go down that path much more. But I thought that if I admitted I wanted to be an actor and that I started, having makeup on my face or, these clothes, that would make me gay, and that would just be a not good thing.
Well, then you said this was years and years ago.
This was years ago.
Yeah, where there isn't, granted, there's still plenty more room for rights to grow, but it was, back in the day.
Back in the day, this was not.
It's
not how it is today.
Exactly.
Not how it is today.
And then
was that macho football player. That was the position I'd been in. And so that was underneath it all. I didn't want to really talk about or admit that. So anyway, I got back into, I went for it, and I got my first audition. I booked the job. That never happens.
Do you remember what that job was?
I do. I'll never forget as long as I live. It was for a cable TV show on the USA channel, which I don't know if it still exists or not, but it was called Silk Stockings, Stalkings. And it was a cop show at night, like male cop, good looking guy, female cop, good looking girl. And they went and solved crimes allegedly that were in Palm Beach, but Palm Beach was really San Diego.
Yeah.
And it was great. And so when I got kicked out, I was like, I don't know anything, but I want to go back into acting because that's the only thing that makes sense to me. And I say art saved my life. Well, my art did save my life because, going back to acting class and doing these scenes of TV scripts and theater pieces from, plays and films and stuff like that, you can get lost in doing this character work. And you don't understand it. I certainly didn't understand it at the time, but it helps you work through these unresolved, unexpressed, unexperienced, unobserved emotions. And but the bigger part of it is the conversations you start to have with your fellow actors and your fellow writers, and your fellow artists and your fellow dancers and producers, and because there's this beautiful thing that happens in the art world, whatever your discipline may be, and everyone's got a story, and there's a million things that have happened a million different ways, and a million different cuts, and a million different bruises, and a million different traumas. In the artist community, we talk about these things, and it's a safe place, and there's really no judgment there, and there's really no condemnation and no criticism, because everyone's got these wounds. And the funny thing is, these wounds are everywhere. It's not just in the artistic community. It's just this certain bravery that artists have. Did I just call myself brave?
Okay. Yeah.
In that community. One night I saw this woman on stage in an acting class, and she was complaining about an audition that went wrong. It was for a major primetime television show, and I'm in the back of the room, and I'm working at a print shop during the day with my father, and our relationship was a little challenged, to say the least. And in business, it got amplified. And I'm driving about 60 miles one way. It's 120 miles both ways to come to this acting class on a Thursday evening in LA. And I'd give my left arm to be in her position. And she's complaining about it. Damn it. And then she did a scene, and it was like, holy shit, she changed the molecules in the room. Like, okay, I don't know much, but I know that if I want to get better, I got to get with the best in the room, and that's her. So I wanted to do a scene with her. And so finally we set up a time to get together and meet, and I drive up the canyons and to go to her place. And on the way there, I stop and I'm like, well, I'm on my way there. I'll be there in about 10 minutes. And she tells me she's writing a book. And I'm like, writing a book? Okay. She goes, I haven't eaten all day. So, maybe we could get something to eat, or I don't know. I'll see you when you get here. And I'm like, this is weird. Well, I'm not going empty handed. And so I stopped at Mickey D's, and I got a burger, fries, and a Coke. And I drove up the canyon, and I got to her house, knocked on the door. She lets me in. I hand her the food, and she says, thank you. And I look around, and it's very neat. It's very well apportioned. And, you could see that an actor lived here. And it wasn't like she was blazingly rich or something. And everything was very clean and neat and organized. And then on the floor, my attention's drawn to all these pictures. There's like 200 glossy 8x10 black and whites. And they're all of the civil rights movement. And I look, and I see there's, in the corner of the room, there's a stack of yellow legal pads, and they're handwriting. Right? I'm like, that's weird. And I see another stack on the other side of the room. And so I look around, I said, what's that? She goes, oh, that's my book. I'm writing my book. Like, you're writing your book by hand? She goes, yes. Wow. You're going to buy me a laptop or a computer? This was 96, remember? 96. And laptops really hadn't taken off yet. And I said, no, I was just asking. I'm amazed that you wrote that much by hand. And then I look at the pictures a little more closely, and I see there's a guy standing next to Martin Luther King in each picture. And I'm like, well, I know who Dr. King is, but I don't know who that guy is. And they seem to be in a lot of pictures together. And I said, who's that guy standing next to Dr. King in those pictures? She goes, oh, that's Daddy and Uncle Martin. I'm like, who is this woman?
Yeah.
And so turns out her father, now my father-in-law, my late father-in-law, was Reverend Dr. Ralph David Abernathy. And his best friend and he, Martin Luther King Jr., founded the American Civil Rights Movement.
Yeah.
And so, needless to say, rehearsal took a back seat that night. And I had my first lesson in the history of Black people in America.
Yeah.
And I was clueless. I knew nothing. And it was wonderful and disturbing and upsetting and incredible all at once, many more emotions than that. And I realized that not only did I have all this crap about this cult that I hadn't told her, I hadn't told anybody. I didn't even admit it to myself I was in a cult.
Mm-hmm.
But on top of the brainwashing, I
Mm-hmm.
had some racist ideologies floating around in my head.
Yeah.
And not only that were they floating around in my head, it was like floating around in everybody's head in this country because it's unavoidable to not be that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
But
I
it's so to kind
go
of go
ahead.
off of to kind of pick up that, just from the kind of two segments of your life that you kind of been talking about here,
Yeah.
it seems like the big difference in between this is there's a time in your life where you like were vulnerable or you had questions about your life, and you have a very personal example of what when someone comes in with negative intentions and that's how your life ended up,
Yeah.
and then you meet someone with positive intentions and they also
Good
change your
question.
life for what is, for the better. You said you had maybe not even consciously like these like racial biases, and then you meet
That's
someone
absolutely right.
who educated you and taught you, and you were willing to learn and grow.
You
as a
touch on a
person.
really good point. So let me
Please go ahead. Yeah.
dovetail back. So I was talking about the emotional hooks that fill these voids, this emotional vacuum in you. So I'd been through a shit situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And I still hadn't dealt with it yet, by the way. I still hadn't. And this is not anything that was, I was in my awareness that I was consciously aware of at the time when I met my wife. Looking back, when I began to unravel the cult and then began to learn more and more about the history of Black folks in America, and not just the civil rights movement, reparations, Jim Crow, the slave trade, the Underground Railroad,
Mm-hmm.
on and on and on. I had a front row seat to American history. And in that, I began to see what real contribution and real growth, being part of something bigger than myself,
Mm-hmm.
looked like,
mm-hmm.
and what real love was, and real significance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was no avoiding that. There was no not seeing that. And this is how you can meet that need and do good, not only for yourself, but for others too, and for globally, the greater, world as a whole. And I know that sounds a bit idealistic, but I don't know. I guess guilty as charged. That's my Achilles heel. And I've tried my best and still do to temper it with, pragmatism and practicality. But, if I fall short at something like that, I want to be in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
I want to be a part of that group. And so I learned to become of service to people who are less fortunate than me just because of the color of their skin,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or just
Yeah.
because of their geography, or just because of the breadth of their nose, or the texture of their hair, right? And or the language they speak, or their gender, or their race, or their creed, or their religion. And the most beautiful thing started to happen to me in that pain, that that break the Japanese talk about. I'm going to butcher it right now because I'm talking about something else. Kintsugi, right?
Mm-hmm.
You take the cracks in a piece of pottery, and the Japanese fill it in with gold dust and lacquer over it, and they believe that the object becomes more beautiful again. Well, that's what happened to me, and I began to start to heal these cracks in my heart. And damn it, I'm going to get choked up. But it's beautiful, man. It's beautiful. And then I told you this when my wife's book. We didn't get married for quite a few years after I met her, almost 9 years later, 10 years later. I moved slow. Forgive me. I had a few things to work with. I would go on tour with her when she would do these speaking engagements, and they came fast and furious.
Mm-hmm.
And I would sell the book from the back of the room. And sometimes I'd open for her. Other times I would just be in the back of the room. Other times she'd call me out as I was sitting in the audience and say, "Oh, that's my husband." And she would share a story of something we'd gone through, that day, that week, that month, whatever. So the audience always knew who I was. And the audience was, it was always a few hundred to a few thousand people. And after she'd finished speaking, I'm in the back of the room and I'm sell out of the books in no time flat. Invariably, people would come up to me and just unload there.
You mentioned this, that
Yeah.
for whatever reason, or whatever karmic magnetism that you have,
Oh,
you have
yeah.
this apparently unique ability to where people will come up to you and
Yeah.
just start confessing things out of after the word hello. Go
Yeah.
into a little more detail about that.
Yeah. I jokingly say if there's a wounded soul or a weirdo, they're going to find me. And by the way, I'm going to say wounded soul used to be weirdo, probably always and forever, but I love
Yeah.
that about myself. Yeah, they would, the one that comes to mind, and I talked about it to you and I put it in the book. There was an older white gentleman. I was in my, I'd say it was my late 40s, my mid 40s. I don't remember exactly. And we were in, where the devil were we? I think we were in Berkeley at the University of Berkeley.
Mhm.
Might be wrong. Doesn't matter. Not important now. Or we might have been at UMass Dartmouth. That might have been the place. Anyway, this gentleman comes up to me and he's, I'd say in his late 70s, early 80s. And he comes up to me and he's just got this look in his eye. And he puts his hands on my shoulders and he goes, I've got to tell you, I've got to tell you something. I know you understand. I know you understand. I'm like, I know I understand what, and I realize there's something happening here. I don't know what it is. And this gentleman is, he is hanging on by a very thin thread.
Mhm.
And he's elderly. And, for better or worse, I respect my elders. And I definitely respect folks of his age. And so, okay. And he confesses to me that his father was a Klansman and that he was raised in rural Georgia
Mhm.
and that his father was a part of lynchings, stabbings,
Mhm.
beatings, all kinds of horrible stuff.
Mhm.
And he starts to not just cry, he has a cathartic breakdown.
Mhm.
And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay,
Well,
I'm not a mental health professional here. And for whatever reason, this guy thinks I'm the guy. And I'm holding this man after he's talking to me, and he's just snot and tears and blubbering all over my jacket. And, I'm not upset about that, but this is unbelievable.
mhm.
And we talk, and I hold him for a good minute after he finishes confessing this to me. And he goes, I know that you, something like, I know that you're the one I had to talk to, and you're the reason I'm here today.
Mhm.
I couldn't carry this anymore. And after listening to your wife and hearing what you had to say and meeting you guys. And yeah, that happens all the time, all the time. And it's
Mhm.
not always like a racial incident.
Mhm.
you know, I was in a plane flying back from Atlanta to Los Angeles, and I sat in first class that day. Um, it's great if you can do it and afford it. I
Mhm.
could that day.
Yeah.
Gentleman next to me ended up being a guy who builds NFL stadiums,
Yeah.
and he was building his last one, and it was in LA, and he was flying to LA to do it. And I looked at the guy, and he'd bitten all of his fingernails down like to the nubs.
Mhm.
And he's about my age, and he just starts to do the same thing. I'm talking about the stadiums, and he said something, and I like, well, that's interesting. What did you mean by that? And that led to another thing he said. Well, that's interesting. What does that mean? What do you mean when you say that? And next thing I know, I'm hearing his life story, and he looks at me and he's like, I don't know who you are, man, but I've never told anybody this stuff. And I've never felt like I could say it, like it was safe to say it to anybody else. So yeah, I don't know. I told you, like, it's my duty, my dharma. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I'm here for all of it because it does make me feel. I'm grateful for it because it makes me feel more connected
That
to
was my next
everyone.
question, actually, is like, do you ever feel burdened to be that kind of person that to they where people are confessing, maybe not even like big things like that, but people are coming to you with their
Yeah,
internal problems,
yeah,
when they maybe don't have someone else in their life to do that with. But like you just said, it's some kind of duty or dharma that you're taking on for
I
yourself.
guess.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. It's the consternation of my father. He always tells me, you get too close to people. And God bless you, Dad. It's not about getting too close to people. It's their choice, and I can't be the, maybe he's right. I could just push him away. Well, that's not in me.
Hmm.
And I'll never forget, I grew up feeling not heard. I did.
Mm.
For better, for worse. I didn't feel heard. And that not feeling heard makes me feel not understood. And
Hmm.
excuse me, going back, that is a part of, why I got sucked into this, because this guy and this cult, boy, did he listen. But he was listening to find out what my levers were and where
Yeah.
the hooks were and where the buttons were. I don't do that.
Hmm.
That's why I say it's easy. It's not hard to do, because people will tell you everything if you'll only listen.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm grateful for all of it. And yeah, sometimes it did feel like a burden. I'm not going to lie. I'm a human being. There are times where, like I said jokingly, I just wanted to go swimming today. you know, I just wanted to ride on the flight and watch a movie, and
Hmm.
but that's just not how it goes.
Hmm.
And it's okay. And it's okay, because it really does fill these emotional needs of mine in a really fantastic way that doesn't harm me, and it doesn't harm them. It does the opposite of that. And to
Hmm.
me, that's a beautiful gift.
Definitely. Great. So, my next question is, and I hope we kind of lead into it a little bit, what we've been talking about. But in your own terms, or whatever that may be, what is something that you're most proud of that you've accomplished, big or small?
Well, I've touched on both of them. I, overcoming, I'm actively anti-racist,
Hmm.
right? And it's important to me, obviously. I'm married to a Black woman. I'm married to the Abernathy family. I know, Bernice King, Martin King. I know Dexter King. Rest in peace, Yolanda. I know
Hmm.
them all. And rest in peace, Aunt Coretta. So I don't take any of it lightly. And working through that, a bitter, tough pill to swallow.
Hmm.
And you can see it is for all people, all white folks, whitish folks, and people who are in that thing. So I'm proud of that. But the thing that allowed me to get there, that I'm the most proud of, was working my way out of brainwashing and this
Hmm.
group think and this cult experience and the abuse. And that's where I learned. I went to a therapist, an old gentleman, like in his late 80s, and he says, "Son, you have PTSD." And I'm like, "PST what?" And he said, "No, no, no, PTSD." First time I heard it in my life, post traumatic stress disorder. And I was like, "I don't know what that means." I said, "Isn't that what soldiers have?" He goes, "Well, yes." Then he started to explain it to me. So working my way out of that,
Hmm.
I did it on my own. Like, I got a little bit of guidance here and there, but at the end of the day, I mean, if it was to be, it sounds cheesy, but it was up to me. And I did that, and it was hard. And there's something they call the dark night of the soul.
Hmm.
Let me just say, it's not a night, it's more like 10 to 15 years, and it does get dark, but it's worth every bit of your effort to go through something like that, because you begin the process of learning and knowing who you are. And Plato was right. Know thyself.
Yeah.
Shakespeare, to thine own self be true.
Hmm.
I'm
Awesome.
weird that way. I told
No,
you.
no,
I'm
it's
weird.
great. It's great stuff. It's very rare to meet someone who has that kind of introspection into not just themselves currently, but into their past lives, and want to actually confront it and then grow as a person. I think that's a pretty brave thing, and then I think it's not, when someone actually accomplishes that, it's definitely not celebrated enough, I don't think.
Well, I
To
mean, you're
to
very kind to say that. Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank
I
you.
think so.
Yeah, I
Um,
appreciate that.
yeah.
See, it
Uh,
still feels a little weird talking about it, but there was,
mhm.
for me, I didn't feel like I had a choice. I did not feel like I had a choice.
Mhm.
The moment of truth happened just around late 99, just, yeah, late 99. I was I was in the kitchen of my girlfriend's house, and I was thinking, man, I'm just miserable. I can't go through this. I cannot go on living like this, but I'm not going to kill myself, because I know that this life's a gift. At least I choose to believe it. So if I'm not going to do that, what am I going to kill everyone around me? Like, that's not an option. So I've got to
Mhm.
kind of go through the fire.
Yeah.
So weird guy. What are you going
Sure.
to do? Yeah.
No, because we've talked a lot about your past.
Yeah.
Now I want to kind of talk about where you are right now in your life and in the future.
Okay.
So would you mind giving us just a bit of an update on what you've maybe accomplished recently, what's going on right now, kind of in Hollywood? And
Yeah.
the final question is, what is something that you still hope to accomplish in your life?
Oh God, do I have the bravery to say that? I don't know. We'll see. We'll work into it.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, I started out as an actor and I've been very fortunate, very fortunate. I've had a decent career. I've made a living at it up until about 5 years ago, really in earnest, maybe 7 years ago, things started to really change drastically. What are we,
Mhm.
2023? About, well, let's say 6 years ago.
Okay.
And it's the reason why the actors and the writers guilds are on strike now. So the thing that they're fighting about, it, what the studios, they call the AMTPA,
Mhm.
might have butchered that, who cares? But it's the Motion Picture Television Producers Association of America. They are the producers in the studios and the networks. And they're saying disingenuously, which is a big word for lying,
Mhm.
that the actors and the writers are being unreasonable,
Mm.
right? And this was said by Bob Iger, the chairman of Disney. I'm never going to work again. But Bob, let's be honest. You said it, not me.
Mhm.
And it's disingenuous of you to portray that we are being unreasonable when your salary last year was approximately $27 million,
Mhm.
and that's before your stock options and bonuses. Um, I would suggest that not the writers and the actors are not being unreasonable, because what's happened is these streaming platforms started to say, cut the cord, cut the cord, cut the cord. It sounds good, right? Don't buy cable. You don't need cable TV. You don't need, network TV, but you still need a cord that brings your internet into your house so that you can be on your computer and,
Mhm.
watch these streaming platforms. Well, these streaming platforms don't pay residual payments. Not only do they not pay residual payments, they don't even show the numbers of the views they have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if they did that, we would be in an uproar. Well, it took a while because actors and writers eat a lot of doo doo. And we've gotten to that point of maximum doo-doo consumption,
Mhm.
and enough's enough. So they're on strike now because of it. Um,
Another
yeah,
thing to kind of go off with, because I have a couple of friends who are in the WGA,
yeah,
and what they're really trying to do for the writers' rooms is turn writing TV shows, movies, and whatever into a gig job rather
yes,
than a full-on career like it has
yes,
been forever, right? So to
yes,
kind of give a little bit more details on what they mean by that is,
yes,
well, one, they're reducing number of episodes bought, right? So what
correct.
used to be 10 episodes a season for an hour long
24. No,
show.
no, 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 no. 20, 22 to 24
Right. Yeah,
episodes.
for like sitcoms and stuff. Yeah, so it used to be 20, 24 episodes. Um, and now the new model is reducing that
Might be
down to
6 to 10.
8. Yeah, to like 8 to
Yeah,
10. Yeah.
right,
So
right.
that reduces they're reducing the number of writers in the writers' rooms, and they're also getting rid of a lot of their duties, such as
Right.
having a writer on set because
Sure.
new material might come up later, or better versions of stuff, or the
There's no
actor might
might.
have.
There's no might about that. It's
Yeah,
going to come up. Having been on hundreds of sets.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah. That sounds like a throwaway line. That's not. That's critical.
yeah.
That's critical. Yeah. It's a
Uh,
big deal, and they're fighting for it, and they're right. 22 episodes has now become 8 to 10.
mhm,
That's having your business,
mhm,
more than having your business.
yeah,
That's devastating. So what's happening is we're not getting our pension built up. We're not qualifying for our health care,
mhm,
and we're not getting any residual payments, which is how we can survive in between jobs. Oops,
right.
sorry. When you're an actor and a writer, you get a big payday for the job you get. And people are like, you guys are making so much money. No, 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 no. Not the case.
Yeah.
We do earn a huge lump sum, a huge nut up front. Here's your big, gigantic acorn.
Mhm,
But that's because you don't work for long stretches of
yeah.
time. And then you count on those residual payments coming in because you don't work for long stretches of time, and it affords you
Mhm,
health care. So if anything goes sideways, and the older you get, things go sideways. And that's just not theirs. So Bob Iger did the worst thing he could possibly do. They've painted themselves in a corner. It's become contentious by saying that, we're being unreasonable. Now, let me flip the script real quick. I believe that the actors and the writers are, I hate to say this because I just said it's dismissive. They're not looking at this practically in a real world term because they refuse to address the business issues. Now, I don't have the best business mind in the world. Better than some, not as good as, better than most, not as good as some. This is a zero-sum game that's being fought currently, and it's not going to work. And the fact that the Actors and Writers Guild let it get to this point is unbelievable to me, because as soon as the internet came in, you had to nobody has a crystal ball, but you have to realize, oh shit, this is going to start to change things. And there were a lot of whispers and stuff. And this was avoidable. And I can't speak to the Writers Guild, but the Screen Actors Guild, SAG-AFTRA, they call it.
Yeah.
Because it got married with the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. We are now one bigger union. It did nothing to strengthen us, unfortunately. But what they did was they conceded to a contract called the New Media Contract. New media meaning these streaming services. So the base minimum is just under $1,000 for a day, the scale for an actor. Okay. Right. Now they can do these new media shows for as little as $125 a day.
That's the day rate. Yeah.
That's a tenth of the scale. Now, my day rate was above that. Mine was more than double that. I haven't gotten that in I don't know how long because of this.
So I know that people like Bob Iger have said that, it's, the actors and writers are being unreasonable. And the thing is, they're not being totally unreasonable, because there are studios currently right now that are still filming with SAG and WGA workers because they're meeting all of their demands. A24 is the big one that I can think of off the top of my head, that, okay, we see your demands. We're kind of meeting all, if not most of them. And because we still want to have our productions keep going. Now, granted that, A24 is such a tiny studio compared to things like Disney, Fox, or whoever. But if they're able to do it,
they're not that small. They're of note, man. They are of note.
Well, they just cleaned up at the Oscars last year with Everything Everywhere All at Once. So I'm sure they just got huge things of money. But the thing is, my point,
they're not known to the general public. You're right.
Yeah, they're able to stay in business though by actually coming to the table. And
you're talking about the Screen Actors Guild, SAG-AFTRA, put out something they call the interim agreement. Yes. And the interim agreement meets the 11% salary raise that the Screen Actors Guild union is looking for, and many other things in there. And it's not unreasonable. And so they are meeting these things. And the argument the actors are having, which is not a resourceful argument to have, is that if they can do it, well, why can't you? To Bob Iger's point, look, I don't even know Bob Iger. I met him one time. I asked him for directions.
More than me.
At the Lakers game at the then Staples Center, now Crypto.com arena. He was with his wife, and I made a wrong turn, and he was very friendly, very nice guy. He wouldn't remember me from Adam. And I met Willow, his wife, years ago when Hoyt first got into the industry, modeling game. She was a model too. He's right. We're being unreasonable. The actors are being unreasonable in the way they're approaching this. Okay, I'm going to be very, 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 very liberal with that definition of that word, because back to the topic of my book, one of the things that I've learned and that kind of organically grew out of this whole process that I've gone through was the art of listening, active listening. And if you do that and you start kind of using the Socratic method and you're asking questions, you're just trying to get clarification and just keep listening, you become a rather skilled negotiator, quite by accident. That I just have a natural curiosity to be a better negotiator. And so I started to study that more. And I've been very successful negotiating my own contracts, frequently coming in. I think generally I get about 2.5 times more than the initial offer, but that's not about that. Like, because that sounds like it's just a money grab for me. Yay, I win.
Mm-hmm.
No, because a really fruitful negotiation is when not only do I get my needs met, but they get their needs met. And here's the kicker. They're willing to do business with me again, and I'm willing to do business with them again. That's a big deal. That's a big deal because both sides have walked away feeling good. And it's not about splitting the difference or getting a win-win. No. It's not about that. It's about meeting and listening to the needs and meeting the needs of both sides. And it can be done, but it requires patience and definitely a different strategy than they're currently employing.
I think we got time for just one more kind of question here before we wrap things up. What advice would you give someone who wanted to go into acting and possibly even move to LA right now? Would you tell them to, hey, why don't you wait till these strikes are over and then come back to the table or then come to LA? Or just or this is another thing that's very fun. I had a professor of mine who, when I was first going into writing at college, he was like, this is what you're going to have to do. And he kind of breaks down that entire profession and all of the potholes and like the things that you could fall into, all the traps. Then he was like, if you're not willing to deal with all of this stuff, he goes, learn how to weld. The world will always need welders. We were never going to run out of welders. Learn how to learn that kind of skill.
What was his name? What is
his name? Was Aaron Gwynn. I actually have his book. If I can pull it up here.
You should right now.
Yeah. So his book here is Wind's War. Actually, this is his first big one by Aaron Gwynn. He had another one to come out, I want to say last year. Where is it? I have it here somewhere. Yeah. It's called All God's Children. And this actually won the Oklahoma Book Award. So he won like the best book for his home state here. And he's
bravo, sir. Bravo.
Genius writer that I had the privilege of studying under when I was an undergrad.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Because you just said a mouthful before you shared the books. By the way, Mr. Gwynn, Aaron, free pub on this? Come on. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Not that you needed it. How did you feel? Do you remember how you felt when he broke down what you had to look for and then said, if you aren't willing to deal with this, go be a welder because the world will always need welders?
Yeah.
Do you remember how you felt when you heard that? And what
I do. So to kind of go back before that moment for me, I had, because I grew up in like pretty rural North Carolina, anything artistry related just was not a career path, right? It just wasn't.
That's the understatement of the day.
It wasn't really kind of bashed on. It was just like, we just don't do that, right? Like if you, it's very common, like, you went to go and be a farmer, you joined the army, you got into college on a football scholarship, and then made
the drill.
And then, or then you moved to Charlotte to go into banking because that's what's famous in Charlotte right now.
Fair.
And so I was at college and I, like most college students, didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I took a creative writing class with him. And like the first couple of assignments he gave me, it was just an explosion in my head. I was like, oh, this is exactly what I want to do. I don't care how hard it's going to be. Cool. I was learning that because he had written these books before, and was like, he made a career out of writing. I'm like, oh, right. Books don't just come out of nowhere. This is an actual career path for some, if not a lot of people. Right. I was like, this is what I want to do. And then he comes in with the speech of, if you're not willing to do all this kind of stuff, go learn how to weld. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm willing to take on what an uphill climb that's going to be. And I'm really going to try to make it. And why? Because
why were you willing to do that?
Because that feeling of writing felt so good to me that I'm like, okay, it is worth dealing with a lot, not anything. It's definitely not for me, not something where if I had to give up, family, peace of mind, safety to kind of do that kind of career, I could walk away from it that way. But if it was one of the things like, if you just have to deal with a lot of hardship and then be okay with not making it for years and years, I'm willing to do that. Like it was one of those, it's one of those kind of
Honest to
scales
God.
of like, what are you willing to give up in order to gain the thing that you want the most?
Right on. I can answer your question now.
Mhm.
Anyone who just listened to your answer can hear the incredible courage and the deep passion you have for your art. That's magic. That's
Mhm.
sacred, and that's beautiful. And it requires unbelievable guts to pursue something like that, because Aaron's right. The world's always going to need welders. My old man told me in a heated moment, but it fits. Like, the world will always need garbage men, right?
Yeah.
When I dropped out of school, and like that cut deep, and fuck you. But, and it was still years. My path was different than yours. It is tough, man.
Mhm.
If you want to come to LA, I'll say this: if you can think of anything else in the world that you want to do, then go do that. Go do that. Like, this will always be here, but it's not what it's portrayed on television. It's not what's portrayed in the streaming services, not what's portrayed on the big silver screen. It's just not. It's, by the way, neither is any of the YouTube stuff you look at. We all know that.
Yeah.
I think everybody here is
Mhm.
smart. But, I'm assuming this is to a younger person. Not too many older folks are going to drop everything and come to Hollywood. Second thing is, there are about 180,000 people in the Screen Actors SAG-AFTRA Guild, which is the Actors Guild. Out of the 180,000 people, 5% are working actors. Please allow that to sink in.
Yeah.
Now, the definition of working actor, according to the guild, the union, is if you earn more than
26,000. Oh,
$5,000.
5,000. Oh, that's right. No,
$5,000.
26,000 is insurance,
That
right?
that
That's
no,
health
the
insurance.
insurance has gone up, my friend.
It's gone
33,
up too. What is it now?
33,000. 33,000.
33,000.
So if a working actor is earning $5,000 or more, that's considered a working actor by definition. But you can't get your health insurance unless you earn approximately 30,000 or 33,000, whatever. I don't you have to go look at those things.
Yeah. But yeah, but
and
you
only
even said
5% are working actors, right?
Yeah.
So then, if you put that in perspective, like, I've been able to make a living at this business, I made far beyond $5,000.
Mhm.
That small, that the people there, that's like 2.5% of the 180,000 members of the Screen Actors Guild actually make a living, and that's at least about 50,000 or more per year. And then that's like 0.5% are the actual big movie stars and celebrities that we know that are making, hundreds of millions of dollars a year. That ain't the norm. Most people are actors. They have their card. If they're lucky, they work once a year, and they've got Uber jobs, Lyft jobs, bartending, waiting tables, house sitting, dog walking, personal training, you name it. You name it. It's tough. It's really tough. So I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to discourage somebody, but man, it's a tough road.
But it's you have to go in knowing that it's not what you see on TV. The career is very different, and you have to go in being prepared to fail. Is another one that my professor said. Yeah,
absolutely right.
You have to know that is a definite possibility, and that's something you have to fight against. And it's like, okay,
it's an actuality. It's not even a possibility. It's an actuality. You're going to fail, but failure's good. The thing is, how much failure you're able to put up with, and how are you going to handle that? I call it being, calling it being like a realistic dreamer. And that sounds like you got to be able to dream and reach for the stars and your head up in the clouds and believe, even amidst the constant no's, right? Which is like, that's my daily life. No. But be pragmatic with your feet on the ground and realize that this isn't everything, and it's not the end of the world, and that there are other options to it.
Definitely. And start developing that thick skin for rejection early, because that was one thing that
you have to, and even then, even with that thick skin, there's still, even now today, moments where I wake up and go, what the hell am I doing with my life?
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially when you're middle of the worst strike in I don't know how many decades,
Hmm. Sure.
bad stuff.
That's one thing. So this is one a little more for the writers out there. This is when I was first starting in writing short stories. So I had listened to a lot of people's advice that if you're starting to do a writing career, you really just got to write stuff and finish and then learn to do the next stuff, because the first, few stories, novels even that you write, they're probably not going to be very good, because it's a skill that you just have to develop.
Yeah.
But another thing that nobody taught me specifically was that you really need to get okay with the idea of rejection. And so what I developed for myself was that every time I wrote a short story, I would send it out to literary magazines. And I remember every time I would get a rejection email, I made myself stop whatever I was doing. If I wasn't at work, I would stop whatever I was doing and I would go write the next thing. I would go work on the next piece of project. Now I would make my rejection the
fuel for your fire.
The next one. Because if I stopped and I just thought about it, and I would just start criticizing myself and be like, oh, what are you doing? You're no good. Why would you ever think this? And I'm like, nope, you're gonna do the next thing, and you're just gonna take it on the chin, and you're gonna go write that next one.
That is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
That is brilliant. Really smart. Who taught you that?
Nobody. I just did it myself. I was just like,
you did, really?
I knew myself well enough to where, like, if I got a rejection letter, and I just sat there and I would let it stew, it would eat me from the inside out. And I was like, I can't have that, because this idea of what I want to do is too important to let that happen, for let myself kind of sabotage it. So I had to be like, okay, you're gonna go work on the next thing, even if I already done writing that day. And I was like, all right, you just got to get another sentence down, you're gonna make another step forward.
My God,
I still have
master class.
There's a very famous story of Stephen King. This is when he was coming up, rejection letters came in the form of actual letters in the mail. Yeah. And he said he and this is in his book on writing, he would nail just a nail into the wall that would stick out, and then he would puncture the letter on the nail. And then he said he got so many letters at one point that the nail fell out of the wall. And then that was before anything ever got published. And so in that same kind of vein, I still have just a folder full of rejection letters in my email inbox that I never look at, because that's just too masochistic to actually look at all that kind of stuff. But I do know that, whenever it comes in the future, if anyone's ever asking, like, oh, how did you ever do this? Did you do the kind of stuff? I'm like, no, I had to go through all this stuff, and I can show them that folder.
Wow. I'm impressed, man. I have a similar thing. I tracked every audition I went on. Mm-hmm. Color coded that stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, a couple times actor friends have come over back in the day. I don't do it anymore. And they're like, what is that? I'm like, your audition book? I'm like, yeah, I keep track of the auditions. I go on, what? Yeah. It motivated me, right?
Absolutely.
And it didn't make me feel like I was out of my effing mind, and all I did was go and go blah, 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 in front of some camera, and then never hear from anybody again. Because those are the no's I got. Yeah. The no's you get as an actor very rarely to your face is no. It's just the phone fade or the email fade. You just don't hear anything anymore. Mm-hmm. Get ghosted, as the kids say today. But I did that. And then the other thing, when it became largely electronic, so, you've got all your emails. I just create a folder, and I've got, I don't even know how many, all the auditions I've ever gone on over the last, I don't know how many years, man. And I don't go through them. I did, like, one time I've gone through them once or twice and looked, like, wonder who got that job. And I would get lost in that rabbit hole looking to see who got it. It doesn't matter, because those things are out of your control, which is the brilliance of what you do. You got to focus on what you can control, and you can't control why they did it, why they made the decision to pass on you, why they passed on your story or your short story or your book or your novella or whatever it may be, or your script or your audition or your dance or your piece or your performance that day with the horn or the guitar. you got to focus on what you can control, which is why I think it's brilliant. You immediately stopped and said, F this. And you went and wrote at least one line.
Mhm.
You're not going to write a page. You're not going to you just wrote one line. And if you write the one line, I guarantee you're going to write the second line.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would do the same thing, man. I would do the same thing.
Cool. All right, Dar, I think that is an excellent note to end things on here. Before we wrap up this episode, where can people find your stuff?
Okay. I was hoping you didn't ask me that. I'm revamping my website as we speak. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter. And you can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn if you're so inclined. You can go to my website. I apologize in advance. I like Cooper and this whole process of manuscripts so much and the accelerator program that I knew that when this question came up, I was going to have the moment I'm having right now, and I decided to do it anyway. But you can go to dardixon.com and find me there and reach out to me there. It's not in good shape right now, but it's there and it exists.
Sure. Well, also, like in the description down below, we'll put links to all of your other social medias and stuff like that as well.
Okay.
All right. Well, I want to thank again our guest for today, the incredible Dar Dixon, for joining us here on Beyond the Manuscript podcast. Beyond the Manuscript podcast, of course, is brought to you by Manuscripts. Manuscripts never write alone, right? If you like what we're doing here, please hit that like and subscribe button at the bottom of the screen or wherever it is nowadays. And in the comments down below, let me know what is something that you always hope to accomplish in your life. So everyone at home, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me, man.